Hello, welcome to OpenServ DevInsights. And today we need to talk about agents.
Let's do it.
We aim at OpenServ to bring agents that can solve real-world issues to help
Right.
people and really create a future of work where human and AI work together. But to do that, we need to create good agents.
Right.
But what is good agent?
I think a good agent is one that does what you ask it to do reliably every single time. And I know that's a little bit of a broad statement, but we expect agents of all backgrounds and of all sorts. So a good agent is whatever your goal is to do, like image creation, crunching numbers, looking at crypto wallets, or creating blog posts, or whatever you like. A good agent is one that works on its own autonomously until it gets the answer right, or until it does what you actually expect it to do. Not what you tell it to do, but you expect it to do, right? And then doesn't cause any further frustration.
Can you give maybe an example about a good and a bad agent?
So an example is this. We have open sourced a deck screener agent, and it allows you to look for certain tokens with certain parameters, and it gives you the top 5. A good agent is one that gives you the top 5 tokens reliably every time you ask them, whereas a bad agent is maybe giving you the first one only, or the second one, or the top 3, or the next 5, or worse even, a random selection of 5 tokens, which is something that you need to verify independently, because the LLM there thinks that it's giving you the top 5, and it kind of wraps it in a gift packaging so that you think it is the top 5, but it may not be the top 5. So this is a bad agent.
Let's put ourselves in the user perspective. And can you give me a real example? If I'm a user and I'm looking for an agent and I want, for example, how would that look like if me as a user, I want something, I expect something, what a bad agent will return and what a good agent will return for me?
So here you might be asking for the image of, I don't know, a particular depiction of a scene, for example. And you might want it in a certain style. Let's say you want to have like some dramatic cinematic shot, and a good agent would comply with that. And a bad agent would probably give you the same scene that you want, for example, in a cartoonish style, or give you a completely different scene with the style that you want. And there you would need to correct the output. And they're like, no, that's actually not what I asked you to do. I asked you to do this other thing, which is something we're all familiar with all the AI tools right now, right? Like we feel like we have to correct them all the time.
And how do you create a good agent?
It's very difficult because there are a lot of different things that you have to take into account. One is, first, you need to understand the intent or the expectation, again, beyond the words of what the user tells you with respect to what they want. And then you need to be able to produce the right conditions to produce that outcome, because obviously your agent can serve a multitude of purposes, and you need to find a niche of the exact parameters the user actually expects. Again, there's a big difference between what the user expects and what they tell you they want. And then you also need to make sure that your output kind of ensures that it is in line with the expectations. Now, this is practically this brings up a need for sophisticated feedback loops and systems to make sure that you get everything right. And OpenServ here fills a big gap in your agentic workflows in terms of development of these autonomous AI agents. Because what we do is we give you the opportunity to be part of a bigger project team. So the user is not necessarily directly talking to you. The intent of the user has been clarified. The expectations have been clarified way before it reaches you. So whatever you take on as a task is a refined, validated, almost always with the user themselves, validated set of inputs and outputs that you should provide, which is really important. So we take the first piece out. The second one is you as an agent developer need to define the skills and capabilities of your agents with all the parameters that they accept. So if you are, again, an image generation agent, and if you're trained to use a different model based on the style, for example, the style that you expect the image to be generated in, whether it's cinematic. Let's say you were creating an agent that can create images that look like they're taken out of movies from a certain era, right? Like, and obviously we know, especially in Hollywood, like each era has its own look, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, 50s, 60s. Like you can even imagine like how they change over time, right? 70s, if you're obviously a cinema nerd like me, you can like, you have like signature shots from each era that depict how they look because there's a certain aesthetic to it. Now, this becomes a parameter. What is the era? And you need to tell the system, the OpenServ, through the OpenServ SDK, you need to tell that you are capable of generating images through these parameters that are like 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and the exact nature of that parameter. Like, do you expect just a 2-digit number that shows you the decade, or a 4-digit number that shows you the year, like 1930, 1940? Or do you expect a couple of parameters that define that style, maybe that genre? And then, you use those parameters in your output to give the platform and the user what they expect to see. And now, so with that, we also take care of the second part. And the third part is the output. You have to make sure that whatever you created exactly matches the expectations of the user. And there, it's again very difficult to build these on your own. Like, imagine all of the agent developers building these systems on their own all the time. It's very, very challenging. So what happens is OpenServe platform runs a shadow agent for you that will do the output validation. So the shadow agent makes sure that your output is matching the expectations above a certain threshold. Obviously, most of what we do is creative work, so we expect certain variations, but we have a sophisticated system for reasoning and decision making to kind of make sure that this is within acceptable limits. Like, you're not omitting something really big, and you're kind of like delivering everything for what the user expects, and that is only then your output, and that is only when your output ends up as an accepted output in the project. So we also take care of that for you.
That was a good answer, but very long
I know.
and very complex. Let's
Yes.
break that down a little bit. Um, Imagine that you're a developer that just put your feet in, and there's so many parts involved.
Right.
So when you're creating your agent, how how do you even start creating? What do you need? What are the parts that you need to start creating an agent?
I think we laid this out on our developer streams, especially on YouTube, where I lay out like how to get started with OpenServe. Everything starts with our SDK. Now, if you're not using TypeScript, because our SDK is written in TypeScript, you don't have to use the SDK. Everything is available over our REST API as well. And when you're a developer, you get access to the REST API too. But we believe it's much easier to use the SDK. So if you're familiar with TypeScript already, you can immediately start using it. And, or you don't even need TypeScript. You also can use JavaScript to write your agents. So everything starts with our SDK, which is already like built in a way that is super straightforward to get started. You just need an API key that you get through the platform. And what you do there is you add capabilities to your agents and you define them one by one, the name of the capability, the parameters that it takes, and finally what it actually does. And there, what I recommend is, since we take care of all of the complicated features of collaboration with different agents and making sure that the output is actually in line with what is expected, all you have to do is to fill in the gap of delivering the value itself. If the goal is to look at the price of a token, for example, you probably don't even need to build any smart features that rely on large language models. You can just add a third-party API to look up the token price, and just return that. So it's a very simple lookup. Like the first filter you would have is maybe the name of the token or maybe the network itself. And then you do a lookup on a third-party API and return the result. This is also how our Dex screener example works. And that's the very first setup. Like, it's super straightforward to get started with. You just add the custom functionality based on a third-party API or your own API. And then we offer that as an agent, as an autonomous agent that can take actions on the platform. When you want to create a file, for example, on the platform for other agents or the user to use, you don't even have to do that yourself. You don't even need to know how to create a file on the platform, which is a very simple function call like this.create file, this.upload file. But what we do give you is the second brain, another shadow agent that allows you to collaborate with other agents. So it's okay if you just return the response. You just say, this is the response of my agent, and it's supposed to be saved as a file. And the shadow agent makes sure that it is saved as a file. So you don't even need to know like any of the collaboration features of the platform. You need to get these inputs from the user and maybe just understand them from the user's original message. So that's the first layer. And you have your API. You build the functionality through your API, through the third-party API that you use. And finally, there has to be some certain control of checks and balances. Have you done a good job? Is the output correct? Does it fulfill the expectations of the user? And does it serve both the users and your interest? And this is the final step in creating a good agent.